As you guys probably know by now, I invest in a decent number of early stage startups that are building things in the general space that we're all in, which means that a lot of these AI dev tools that you guys see all the time are things that when I'm able to, I reach out to, try them out, and if I like them, I throw some money their way so that if they do succeed, I can make some more money in the future. Which is why I just invested in Nautilus, the car wash platform that converts, captures, and keeps members. What else did I invest in this batch? Co-create, professional first tooling for faster, smarter, better video edits. These aren't developer tools. What's going on? Where did I even find these companies? Well, turns out I'm finding them from Y Combinator. Because I was a Y Combinator founder myself back in winter of 22 before I was actually taking YouTube very seriously. I went from one of the biggest Y Combinator haters to somebody who saw a lot of the value in it to slowly really liking the team, the vibes, and most of what goes on over there. Joining YC is one of the best things I ever did for myself, my company, my YouTube channel, and now my overall portfolio. It has been awesome for me in almost every single measurable way. So why the hell am I investing in a car wash company? I'm sure there was lots of other dev tools and things in this batch, right? Well, that's what we're here to talk about today. There's a lot of stereotypes about YC and also about investors, both like myself and ones that are very different from me, about how we think about making new companies. In particular, this idea that AI is the future and all of these businesses should be shoving AI into everything if they want to make a lot of money and raise a lot of money. But things changed a lot with this most recent batch. There has been a significant vibe shift that I am very excited to talk about with you guys, because a lot of your assumptions about YC companies are correct, a lot aren't correct, but most importantly, a lot of the assumptions that both you and I have changed meaningfully, especially with this most recent summer 2025 batch. I can't wait to tell you more about what I see is changing here and how it's going to affect the, hopefully, entirety of our industry, especially because I want to make some money here. But if you know anything about early stage investments, you know they take 5 to 10 years to pay out, and I've only been doing this for 2, so my bank account's running a little bit dry. Quick break for a sponsor, and then we'll dive right in. You know what's worse than spending all day waiting for your code to build? Not knowing why it breaks when it fails. I still cannot believe just how bad GitHub Actions have gotten. But what if it could be better? What if it was faster, cheaper, and actually observable? Today's sponsor is here to show you what that looks like, because Blacksmith is killing it. You make a one-line change in your GitHub action, and all of a sudden, life is better. Look at all of the companies that have already made the move, from Clerk to Turso to Supabase and more. They're faster because they use gaming CPUs. That might sound silly, but traditional server processors have way more cores and way lower clock speeds. A lot of the work we do for compiling, even your fancy Rust code bases, by the way, is very single-threaded, so having one fast processor is actually quite a bit better, up to 2 times faster than GitHub Actions are traditionally. Cache downloads are significantly faster, and Docker builds fly because they actually cache the Docker layers on the NVMe drives that are in those same machines. That would be enough by itself, but the observability is more and more my favorite part. Their dashboards are great. You can see how big the failure rates are on various things. You can read through the logs with an actual search and filter. Do you know how useful this is if you have crazy builds going on? At this point, I just wish GitHub would buy them, because this is how actions should work. If you're running CI for your code, you deserve better, and your engineers do too. Check them out today at soydev.link/blacksmith. So before we can go too far, I want to give a brief, what is YC? Because I'm sure some people watching this aren't familiar. They probably even think, and I've seen this enough times, that YC and VC are the same thing. And VC equals venture capital. It's one of the many ways people can invest money in hopes of getting back more money in the future. Venture capital is different from traditional investing because you have to put in a lot more money, you're taking a lot more risk. The potential upside is much higher, but your ability to get the cash back and your overall liquidity is much lower. When you invest in a company that is early stage, you are effectively handing them money to either get equity or for a promise of future equity that you cannot do anything with until a certain amount of time has passed and a certain number of things have happened. If I own half of some really successful company and they haven't IPO'd yet, I can't do anything with that stock. I'm just sitting on it. It doesn't matter how valuable they hypothetically are if I can't do anything with the stock. Whereas if I go invest a bunch of money into NVIDIA and they jump 70%, I can just sell it and I have my cash back in a few minutes. That's the big difference between venture capital style company investment versus traditional stock purchasing, is you have given up all of your ability to sell. And if the company starts going down instead of up, you can't do anything about it. You're along for the ride. which is why there are such strict rules about who can and can't invest in early stage startups. It's a method of protecting people, because if you don't make enough money, you don't have enough assets, and you invest a bunch of money in these startups and they start failing, you can't get your money back. It is incredibly rare for any of these early stage startups to give money back to an investor outside of failing and emptying their bank account as they go bankrupt. Very, very uncommon for people to get their money back. But then if it does go well and you invested in a company when they were worth 20 mil and it turns out they're 20 bill, you're doing pretty well. So that's what venture capital is. So what the hell is YC? YC is Y Combinator. Y Combinator is kind of like a boot camp for early stage startups. It was built by Paul Graham back in the day, and it is still run actively in San Francisco. Their goal is to help early stage companies, founders, and people who want to build some business get the help they need, peers to run alongside, and then investment both from Y Combinator as well as from other potential VCs to get them accelerated and going so they are most likely to succeed with their business going forward. Most early stage startups fail aggressively. And Y Combinator, through a combination of how picky they are about who they let in and the quality of their whole accelerator process when you go there in person for 3 months to learn all about startups and how to run them and scale them and get customers and all of that, that process combined with their pickiness results in a really high successful pick rate for these Y Combinator companies. Here's a post from Gary Tan. I'm very thankful he posted the screenshot during one of the demo day pitches because I would not have permission to share this type of screenshot. But since he has on Twitter, you can tell it's a screenshot because it has the iOS bar on the bottom, and it's also blurry as hell from Zoom. Now I'm actually allowed to talk about this, which is very, very fun. The returns for investors who invested in early stage companies in 2017, since then, the top 10% have had around a 3.5x return over that time. So from 2017 to now, they 3.5x their money. The bottom 25% have only added about 30% of their money through their investments. 2017 was a bit of a bull run with some really successful companies, so a lot of investors, even the worst ones, saw a return there. But 2018 onwards, you'll notice some things. Bottom 25%, so only at about 6% improvement. 2019, 1%. 2020, they're actually down 7% because they're taking losses. 2021, they're down 13% because they've had things go to zero. Because all a startup can do, it's not going to 2x. Most go to zero, and a few 10 to 100x. So your portfolio is primarily composed of companies that failed, with the occasional one that wins that boosts it all up. So how does this compare to YC's numbers for investors that are focusing primarily on investing through YC companies and to YC companies? Investors who have backed at least 3 Y Combinator companies in each demo day batch from 2018 through 2020, the top 10% have 15x'd their money. The bottom 25% have still 3.3x their money. The bottom 25% are doing as well as the top 10% of non-YC focused investors. YC leads the industry. It is the best asset class in venture. These are very, very crazy numbers. If you're not familiar with the term unicorn, it means the company reaches $1 billion+ valuation. And historically, each YC batch has an average of a 6.5% unicorn rate. Each investment either becomes a success, in this case unicorn, or it doesn't, and it goes to zero. The average valuation at demo day is around $20 million post-money save. So that's like the value you're investing in. This implies a 50x multiple needed to achieve a $1 billion+ outcome. The point I'm trying to make here in particular is that YC companies have a very high chance of success. More importantly, if you know about the numbers YC takes, because YC gets 7% of your company and a little bit extra on top through an MFN. We don't need to go into the details of the fundraising, but they get between 7 and 11% of your company. That's a huge amount to take, especially for a less than great amount of money. They only do $500K, and $125K of that is for the 7%. So that's kind of insane. But if you look at the value of the average company that goes through YC versus the ones that don't, you see some crazy things. YC's round sizes are 23% larger. Their valuations are 65.7% higher, and their ARR for when these companies are getting invested, so their actual revenue, is 63% lower. So YC, average round size for a YC company, 3 million, average valuation, 25 million, average ARR, 100K. So 3 mil over 25, you're getting about 10% dilution, a little bit more than that, versus a non-YC company, 2.5 million raised, 15 mil cap, 3x the ARR. So you have to make 3 times more money to raise slightly less money at a significantly lower cap. You're giving up almost double the percentage of your company by not going through YC. From your first round alone, that 7% ends up being worth it. YC is a surprisingly good value for what it is. And that is why Y Combinator has stayed as relevant as they have, and also why they've made many changes throughout. When I did YC, they were doing 2 batches a year. Every winter and every summer, they had a 3-month window where a bunch of companies flew to San Francisco, moved there, and then went through the batch, learned as much as they could about startups, got thrown in front of a ton of investors at the end on a day called Demo Day, and now they get to pitch to these investors what they were building, how much money they're making, and what they need to succeed so they can hopefully get investments in auction style to increase the value of each of those companies so they can go off and hopefully make millions of dollars and become a $1 billion plus company. So previously we had those 2 batches, one every 6 months. That was a 3-month window, and they had 3 months off. Those batches had increasingly large numbers of companies. Like when I was doing it, if I recall, it was in the 300 to 400 company range. Now they've knocked it down a bunch to around 120 to 140 companies. But they also doubled the number of batches. So they do one every 3 months now. Winter, spring, summer, and fall. The summer batch just finished, and the fall batch is just starting now. That introduced a very interesting change. The number of companies being, like, let's say hypothetically, 50,000 companies apply. So we have 50K companies. If we're accepting the top 400 or so, like they did for my batch, I'll knock it to 40K. So it's the top 400. So they take the top 400 of the 40K. That's about a 1% pick rate. YC's pick rates are historically much lower than even the hardest to get into colleges. So this has resulted in problems where a lot of the people who are hunting for the prestige of getting into Harvard end up going ham trying to get into Y Combinator because they've just had their brains rotted with like prestige hunting. Very weirdly common. Not my thing at all. I don't give a fuck about prestige or credentials or any of that. I just want to see what you're doing. So that part's not interesting to me. But the fact that this pick rate is 1% means that they are already cutting out the majority of the options that they had, the majority of the companies that could have went through. And I'm not saying that there aren't good companies in the other 39,600 that applied. In fact, some of the best companies out of the whole 40,000 are going to be rejected. That's a cost they choose to eat because they want to have a good enough filter to increase the likelihood that this 400 is at least one standard deviation better than the overall pile of ones they did not pick. So that was a 1% acceptance rate. But things have changed. 1, more batches. So they're doing multiple batches a year now, 4 instead of 2. Point 2, this one's really important. The number of companies they're accepting has went down, not up. They're only letting in 120 to 140. But most importantly, one that you might suspect, the number of applications has gone up significantly. There are way more companies applying than ever. I've heard numbers as crazy as like 100,000 companies applying per batch. It's kind of insane how high the application rates have gotten, especially when you consider how low the acceptance rates are. So it went from 400 over, I made up 40K, it's probably like 60, but you went from like a little under 1% to 140 companies over 100,000 apps. Now we're at like 0.14%. We're in an entirely different world. I don't know about you guys, but if there's any quality to their process of picking, which we've seen the numbers there is, if I have the choice to pick between the top 400 of 40,000 or the top 140 of 100,000, there's a very good chance that if you're picking from this set, you're going to do very well. And also, there's a good chance that you're picking from this set, you're still going to do pretty damn well. This is fun for a handful of reasons. One of which is to go back to this post. These numbers are based on 2018 to 2020, where the pick rate was much higher. More companies were getting in against a smaller set of applications. If I was to be frank, if the Theo that applied to YC in 2021 that got in for winter 22, the Theo that had recently quit his job at Twitch, had not worked much at other companies beyond a little bit of AWS stuff and Microsoft stuff, didn't have a YouTube or a Twitter that was relevant, was just building tools for creators. It's not that surprising I snuck in here. Twitch as an XYC company, me as a person who can speak well in interviews and write decently well, fight it all you want. Of the types of people who applied to YC at the time, I was within the 1% you would think is most likely to succeed if you know the history of the companies I worked at and you liked the way I talked. It makes sense that people would pick me, especially because our revenue was going pretty fast at the time. I understand why I would end up in that top like 2,000 that get interviews and the top 400 who get in. I would not get into YC right now if I was the person I was then. Theo from 2021 would not get into YC now because it is significantly harder to do so, and I was lucky to sneak in the first place. The bar is much higher, and that is a good thing if you like investing. That said, there were problems. There's a lot of stereotypes about VCs and also Y Combinator in particular. Like, if we're being real, the vast majority of these companies are basically just ChatGPT wrappers. Not that I would know anything about a ChatGPT wrapper. But there is some depth to this statement that is important to understand. The capability of AI is really cool, especially when applied the right way. But there are also problems. If you don't understand the thing that you're trying to add AI to well, you're going to do some stupid things. Let's take our perspective here as developers. I don't know about y'all, but for me, AI first really felt useful when I tried Copilot for the first time. I have a whole video of my reaction to, oh my God, Copilot's actually really good. What the hell? I had no idea it was going to be that good, especially that early on back in I think it was 2022. Never would have expected what happened there. Copilot was a really good thing to have introduce us to AI because it wasn't taking anything from us. Copilot would be introduced to the editor that many of us were already using as a thing that just happens, that tab completes as you're writing. It's not taking away the planning process. It's not taking away the reading of the code. It's not taking away the actual working in the code base. It's just auto-completing a little bit of the typing as you write your code to solve your problems. You couldn't even tell it what to do beyond writing a comment in your code and hoping it would use that comment to do the right thing. That was as far as you could go. But by doing it that way, it never felt threatening. It never felt like the AI was trying to replace the things that we do or the things that we like. And we all got introduced in a way that felt like it matched what we wanted and what we were doing. It made the boring parts easier to do, and it didn't get in the way of the fun parts. But most importantly, and I hope this isn't controversial, Copilot was built by developers for developers. Duh, right? Like, obviously devs built the thing, devs build things, and obviously devs use it. It's a dev tool. There's an important thing here. And yes, it's obvious, the arrows shouldn't be necessary. Copilot was built by developers for developers. Let's make up a company. Let's say there's a company that wants to make AI for flower shops. We'll call it Flow AI, Flowy. We have Flowy, flowers, but we make it easier for flower shops to manage their customers with AI. Now imagine this. Flow AI was built by devs for flower shops. This type of thing was very, very common for us to see. Because Copilot went so well, it seems like adding AI to things that are hard to do is inherently pretty valuable. And as such, one of the most common formats for startups that we were seeing at Y Combinator was Copilot for X. And no, I do not mean X.com. Please stop. I mean X as in a variable for some random thing. Copilot for Thing was the whole brand of, I think, 2 or 3 different Y Combinator patches. The problem was that a lot of the people building this were developers, recent college grads, people who love AI and know a bunch about the cool stuff going on with LLMs, people who know a lot about infra and AWS and those types of things. But they didn't necessarily know about the thing that they were building for, like flower shops. Another interesting one was a company that's founders were recent college grads, had never worked real jobs in the industry, and they were trying to do Copilot for product management. So obviously, they're product managers and they saw some problems they wanted to solve with AI, right? Nope. They had never had a product manager. They had never worked at a company with a product manager. They barely understood what one was. They thought they had identified a hole in the market and that they would fill it. And this is a very common mistake that Y Combinator companies make, but more importantly, startups in general make this all of the time. They see a solution that works for them in a space they care about, and they try to apply it in spaces that they do not understand at all. Very common. The equivalent of this would be, imagine if the first time that developer tooling was using AI, instead of it integrating into our tool, some non-dev person, I don't know, some like CEO of Salesforce or something, doesn't know anything about code, comes in and says, we're going to replace all of your developers with AI. We built an agentic tool that knows Mongo and Python really well and is going to replace all of your code bases with our new magical AI. How many devs are going to try out that fucking thing? The answer is none, because nobody is trying to replace themselves at their job. They're trying to make the boring parts less boring, the hard parts less hard, and the fun parts more relevant in their day-to-day lives. And that was what Copilot did well. So obviously, Y Combinator companies had to adjust because too many of them were making these types of mistakes. And they did. They moved from Copilot for Thing to a much, much better Cursor for Thing. That solves all the problems, right? Because Cursor's definitely not the same thing, or possibly even worse, because it takes over more of the work and leaves you less of the fun parts to do. That couldn't happen. The place where I saw this pattern the most, at least the place that affected me and I cared about the most, was in video. I cannot tell you how many video AI companies I have talked to that went through Y Combinator that were people who either didn't make content or didn't like or care about content, that decided everyone would be a YouTuber or an influencer if only it was easier to make videos. Editing is too hard. That's the reason nobody is out here making videos. If we made it easier, everyone would be a creator. The reason nobody's a software engineer is because typing is too hard. It's way too hard to use a keyboard. If only we made keyboards easier, everyone would be a developer, right? Do you see how stupid that sounds? Do you know how often I would hear pitches that sound like that? I won't say it was the majority of companies, but it definitely felt like the bottom 30 to 40 percentile was stuff like that. I cannot tell you how many times I had the Copilot for Thing, Cursor for Thing, AI assistant for Thing conversations where they understood the AI part, the Copilot part, really well, but they didn't understand jack shit about the other side. This is the thing that changed in this batch. It was a change that was already starting to brew due to the nature of how much pickier they're getting with their acceptance rates, but also because I'm pretty sure YC noticed the same trend. They were investing in these companies that were doing AI for a thing, but they didn't really understand that thing very well. I understand why, seeing this trend, you would assume that Y Combinator encourages this, but they actually do the exact opposite. Here is Gary Tan's thoughts on this from before.
The most important part of design, I think, is actually the empathy for the user. Mm-hmm. Like, you sort of have to be like an ethnographer. You're going in and seeing, what is this person like? What are their goals? What are their motivations? If you're selling enterprise software, the most important question is, how do they get promoted? Mm-hmm. Yep. And so if you can actually do all of those things, load it into your head, whether it's having actually lived that life or being able to be around people all the time who live that life, only then can you design something that is appreciably 10x better than the thing that they were doing before.
And to that, I know IC's been at least public about advising founders or would-be founders to go work in a call center, go, do some of this.
Yeah, go
to
undercover.
Go undercover to develop that empathy. Are folks taking you up on that?
Yeah, totally. I mean, there was a company recently. I mean, this is one of the cool things about open source large language models. We had a medical billing company where one of the co-founders went and got a job as a medical biller on Zoom. Yeah. And, they were able to write software and write prompts and deeply understand what is it that a medical biller does. Yep. They did it in a way that, didn't violate anything because none of the data, it's sort of like they were just doing the job. And instead of, them using their wetware to do the job, they were writing software locally using, I think the latest version of Meta's Llama. And so I think that was an incredible example. Obviously, the best way is to deeply understand someone's problem or a space and go in and, totally above board understand things. But sometimes you might not need to do that. You could go undercover and just do that job directly and then deeply understand it.
I love this. It's really hard to improve a job that you do not understand. Building software for users that you do not get, that you do not empathize with, that are not you, is really, really hard. Y Combinator's whole motto has always been build something people want. That is much easier to do if you want the thing. But if you don't understand it, you should at least go get a job in the space so that you can understand how others do it. And they've been encouraging this for a while because they're actually very tired of this, of Copilot for Thing, meaning they don't understand Thing, they only understand AI. And this is how the shift has happened. If we were to rank AI startups in Y Combinator by how well they know AI versus how well they know thing, and we were to do this batch for batch, recent batches have overall looked kind of like this. They know AI pretty damn well, but thing, which I would argue is the important part, the thing they're actually building for, they don't understand that well. And I hate this. I go out of my way to not invest in companies that look like this, where they really deeply understand AI. They can go toe-to-toe with people like me about every detail about the new models, what they do, what they can't do, all the cool tooling and things that happen in the AI world. If this is what your spread looks like when you're building AI for Thing, you know Thing too poorly and AI really well, I'm out. You've lost my interest. I'm not doing it. And this was very common for a while. But a shift has happened. This batch felt fundamentally different. It now feels like this. Multiple companies in this batch admitted that they were actually a bit shy about AI. They felt like they were behind and they didn't really understand it. They'd only started getting into it for real a few months before. That sounds like a red flag until you realize that I also wasn't into AI until late December of last year, and by January of this year, I had one of the most successful AI apps in the space, and by March, my research was being cited in various things. I could spend a much longer time ranting about how most of the AI influencers and sources of information are absolute hot fucking garbage. I'm not exceptionally talented for figuring it out in 2 to 3 months. Everybody else just kind of sucked. So being early to AI and being really deep on AI is often a disadvantage because things change really fast. Things aren't necessarily relevant to your space. And most importantly, as the AI tools get better, your need to understand the AI well actually goes down. But your need to understand the business you're building in only ever goes up. And that's how we end up on Nautilus, one of my favorite companies from the recent batch that I just can't really shut up about because I find what they're doing so genuinely cool and interesting. Nautilus is a car wash platform. They're kind of like QuickBooks. They're kind of like Square Pay. They're kind of like all the things you need to run a small store anywhere in the world, but specific for car washes. That sounds really dumb, right? Like, why wouldn't they just use the existing solutions that are generic and probably cheaper and work well for everyone? The reason is because car washes have specific needs and also specific opportunities to make more money. Things like memberships. How many people in my Twitch chat have a membership to a car wash? 1 if you do, and 2 if you don't. That's a lot of people who drive that don't have subscriptions to their car wash. There's been about 3 so far that do. That's a huge opportunity. That's a way for these car washes to go from just barely profitable to potentially quite profitable. And if this is software that can be sold to a car wash so that they need fewer employees, they need fewer subscriptions, and they have a membership program that will automatically send a text out saying, hey, you're overdue a car wash, and things like that to make it more likely that the car wash can make more money. This is worth a ton of money to all of those car washes. So how did they make this? How do they know all of this? The founder has been working at car washes since he was 16 years old. He integrated all of these things as the cashier at a car wash when he was 17 years old. He ran into so many problems with the software and saw so many opportunities in the space that he started building Nautilus to make that car wash and others nearby even easier to manage. And he succeeded. And then YC let in, as far as I know, their first ever car wash company. And this kid shows up in a fucking sailor outfit and hat and pitches his car wash in a sea of AI dev tools. It was magical. It was powerful. It was exciting. And then he comes up to me at the end and says, oh my God, Theo, your videos helped me so much when I was trying to level up and like build the thing I built. And then I heard what they were doing. And then I heard how much money they're making. And I invested immediately without any further questions because these guys know car washes really well. They didn't know the AI and developer side that well, but they found the resources to figure it out, people like me, and they combined their knowledge of car washes. And I was chatting with them at one point with like other people, and somebody asked like, how do you get all these car washes to sign up? Because they have like a few thousand, I think, that are already using their stuff. And a ton of like big brands are moving all of their like actual shops over. They're doing very, very well with it. So somebody asked, how do you actually get these companies to adopt your car wash software? They said that one of their biggest leads is their regular appearances on Wash Talk, on carwash.com, the podcast, as well as the thing that they had on their website, the webinars that they do, as well as the car wash events and conferences they go to. There's a whole world of car wash content, of car wash events, of car wash CRMs and webinars and all of this shit that none of us know a fucking thing about. We are talking about a different world here. And if you look at my chat's reaction to all of this, OMG, or OMFG, that's so cool. On today's episode of the Car Wash Podcast, you get it. It's kind of nuts. But that's why these guys are going to win. They're not going to win because they're the industry-leading experts in AI. They're not going to win because they're first. They're actually quite late to the space. They're not going to win by making a solution that literally every single company in the world can use. They're going to win by making it so a car wash can make 2 times more money, being the best solution for them by far and the only one they even know about, much less consider. And now they can charge 10 times more than QuickBooks does because it doubles their revenue. And despite having 1/100th the customers that QuickBooks has, they'll be able to have 1/5 their fucking revenue. That is crazy. People underestimate how many weird niche subfields there are out there. Absolutely. But there was a problem with this before. The problem before was that a subfield would need the same amount of engineering effort as the greater, higher level field. It didn't make sense to build something like Vercel before AWS. It didn't make sense for a while after either, because the number of engineers it would take to build something like AWS was too high. Things like AWS, things like Vercel, things like AI, things like React, one of the effects of all of these tools is they allow for a smaller number of people to build a similar piece of software. The number of engineers it takes to build and maintain big applications goes down every single year. The number of devs these companies have go up because the number of things they're doing goes up. But if you want to take a product that exists today and rebuild it next year, it'll be easier. If you take a product that was built 10 years ago and rebuild it now, it'll take you 1/50th the engineers to do a pretty good job. And that's the bet that a lot of these startups are making. This is actually a good question. I think I got a bit disconnected. A quick Google search says the car wash industry is $24 billion. They may know car washes really well, but is a $1 billion company? Absolutely. You don't need to make $1 billion a year to be a $1 billion company. You need to have good profit on like 150 mil a year. So 150 mil a year divided by 24 billion. They only need to capture 0.6% of the total spend in the industry in order to be a $1 billion company. And if they actually can increase the amount of money the industry is worth because all of their customers are able to double their average revenue per customer, this might go from a $24 billion industry to a $40 billion industry, and they can capture a significant portion of that revenue. Why such a high multiple? Because they are probably printing profit off that. Like, what are the costs for a business like what they are doing? They don't have very many employees. They don't have very much infrastructure. They don't have very high costs. If a customer pays them $500 a month, they're probably spending $15 in that month. I don't know any of these numbers. I haven't talked with any of them about any of these things. It's just my understanding of how businesses like this operate. Their cost margins are going to be crazy. Their profit's going to be insane. Their ability to win a significant portion of the industry is absurd. And if they decide to, they can increase the amount they charge and nobody can say no because they're the best solution by far. They are in an incredibly powerful position right now. Another similar example is Co-Create. As I mentioned before, there have been a lot of companies doing AI video tools to make it easier for people who don't know a thing about video to make a crappy TikTok that gets 5 views. Those products have no place in this world and they will all die aggressively and quickly. They piss me off a lot. I cannot tell you how many times I've had to sit in the YC office with a random video company trying to get me to invest in them, where I had to explain, you guys do not know a single fucking thing about video. Your business is fundamentally doomed. The big thing I had to explain is that the things that make editing slow have very little to do with opening the editor, moving files around, and cutting. When FaZe, my editor, gets access to our assets, he can edit an hour-long video in like 40 to 50 minutes. Hi, FaZe. FaZe, if somebody was to tell you that they would replace Final Cut with an AI that auto-chops the video for you, what would your honest reaction be? How much fixing am I doing after? Probably a lot. And now you have to use their jank Electron app that doesn't have any of the things you need, that crashes when you put 4K videos in. You're in for a bad time. Now imagine somebody tells you, hey, we're building a solution because we were video editors for years and we found that managing our assets and synchronizing them was obnoxious. Start to make a little bit more sense? This is the first video company I have talked to in the startup world, period, that mentions things like time code on their website. They have string outs. They'll assemble a timeline based on the content in natural language, creating a string out in daily for the daily recording session you did to see what's worth taking or not taking, to trivialize the process, export it to your professional editing software of choice, running all of this locally so none of your content is being sent to a random cloud somewhere, with AV sync, again, with timecode and things like that all built in, automated organization and management for these giant recording processes that have thousands of hours of footage. And as my editor has said, this is great for AI grouping and stuff. Sounds like awesome for pros, for people in real productions. Absolutely. We had to go the opposite direction on my channel where those types of things were so annoying that I built my whole process with my markers, my external system, my breaking things up via CSVs, and then dumping them on my Dropbox so that my editor can access them. We built that whole system because all of the orchestration of your content is the annoying part. It takes us more time to make sure the right files are tagged in the right place than it takes for us to actually edit the video. And you wouldn't know this if you weren't a video editor and you didn't spend a lot of time talking to actual video creators. This is so common. And it was so nice to sit with a YC company that was going through the batch, doing video product, that literally had just gotten back from New York because they flew out and sat on the floor of a big edit warehouse with like 15 full-timers just doing pre-editing, orchestration, like assistant editors just making sure the right assets were in the right place and making all of their jobs 2x easier. This is a real video company. This isn't an aspiring creator company. I am so tired of the aspiring businesses. We want to make it so everyone can program because programming is too hard. We want to make it so everyone can be an influencer because editing is too hard for influencers to do. We want to make it so anyone can make a viral post because coming up with posts is too hard. All of these things are stupid, and none of these things will work. And the only way you can think this way about any industry is if you are here. If you are Dunning-Krugering yourself because you tried to be an influencer, you tried to be a developer, you found it too hard, so you gave up, and then decided you could make a business selling the solution to other people who gave up. The harsh reality is the people who give up are not good customers. The people who give up are not good to build around. If your business's average customer is an aspiring thing, not the thing, you're doomed. And this is what I realized when I built my Y Combinator startup, Ping. Even though we were focused on building for professionals, the Ping.gg video product very quickly became used primarily by small hobbyists, people who aspired to be a successful creator. They couldn't figure out why nobody cared about their stuff. So their solution to solve this problem was to use professional expensive tools like Ping in hopes that if their quality of video went up, they'd go from 5 viewers to 50. Aspiring spaces are evil. They are full of what we call tar pits. All of these things sound like a good idea until you understand the space at all or you think about it a little bit more deeply. And this trend has existed in most startup spaces, but in particular, I have seen this a lot in YC startups. Not in this batch. Many companies looked like this. One more fun example that you devs can probably relate to. We've all seen the AI vibe coding apps. Most of them are built on top of React Native because React is something that's easy for AIs to write. So React Native with enough wrappers means you can vibe code a mobile app relatively easily. There's a bunch of these. Disclosure, I'm invested in most of them. So if I put a name down, assume I am at this point for the vibe coding stuff. There's Rourke.app. There's A0.app. There's Vibecoder. There's others I'm forgetting for mobile apps specifically, but these were, and I think still are, the big three. All of these companies were built by people who were pretty nerdy about mobile, like A0 in particular. Those devs were two friends in high school that made dozens of apps together, and they built A0 to make it easier to build apps. But now there's an interesting one. BitRig. Build apps for your phone on your phone. You might notice how basic this website is. The reason is because unlike all of the other vibe code app companies, these guys do not understand web for shit. And that's okay, because they're not building a web company. They're not building an AI company. They're building an app builder company. And ready for some very fun facts about BitRig? BitRig is the only one of these AI app companies that I know of that isn't building apps with React Native. BitRig is using SwiftUI because they think that vibe-coded apps should meet the native bar that they care a lot about. But what do they know about SwiftUI? What do they know about native apps? Why are they coming in? Because this is just AI for that, right? Ready for the fun spoiler? The creators, I shit you not, are the creators of SwiftUI. The people who made SwiftUI left Apple and built a vibe coding platform to make SwiftUI apps. Imagine competing with the creators of SwiftUI in vibe coding, building native apps. They admitted to me when we chatted that they did not really feel like they understood marketing or AI stuff very well going in, and they were doing their best to learn it. They asked awesome questions, in particular about branding and marketing stuff. I immediately invested as much as they would take from me. And now they're getting a big moment, as I mentioned them here. If you want to build native mobile apps and you're interested in real native apps by people who understand the platform better than anyone else in the goddamn world, Bitrig are those people. It's worth a shot. And this is also fun for me because I personally, honestly think React Native is more than good enough. But if I am wrong and all three of these investments fail because React Native is not good enough for vibe coding a mobile app, now I have a hedge bet with Bitrig that will cover the difference. If I am lucky, 1 to 4 of these 4 companies will end up giving me a 10 to 100x return in approximately 8 to 10 years. I have nothing to gain at this point in time beyond thinking these things are cool. I'm not promoting these companies because I invested in them. I am talking about them because I want you to understand what this vibe shift was and why I'm interested in them. And really fun question from chat. What if Flutter wins? Really good question. I actually also had invested in 2 separate Flutter companies. Of the many companies I've invested in, only 3 have gone to zero. And of the 3 that have actually went bankrupt and I was able to claim the losses on my taxes, 2 of the 3 were the 2 Flutter companies. So, yeah, Flutter will not be the winner because Flutter can't even get out of early stage. I do invest in things I don't agree with because I want to hedge my bets. If there is a company that is doing a thing that I think is obviously wrong and most of my portfolio is built against, I will invest on the off chance they are right and I am wrong. Actually, we have to touch on one of my favorite things about this batch too. As I've been saying, the AI for Thing companies know a lot about Thing and don't know a lot about AI. You would imagine that these companies probably aren't the most experienced developers if they're building a car wash company. The really interesting trend I saw was for the first time in any batch, all of these AI for Thing companies were really hyped to have me there. Nobody outside of SF knows who I am, but when I go to demo day, I get a decent number of photo requests. People who come up asking like, oh my God, you're Theo. It's so cool to see you here. You down to take a photo? That's awesome. I love that. If you see me in public and you want to do something like that, I'm cool. It's cool to know people know who I am and they resonate with my content. Usually the people who ask for these things would be the founders of the dev tool companies. Like the people who built A0 obviously knew who I was and were hyped to see an email from me. We chatted. They're now good friends. The developer tool companies in the developer space should know who I am because, like, let's be real, I have the numbers here. According to the last State of AI Developer Survey, 54% of respondents watch my videos. Do you want to be in the 46% that don't keep up if your job is to sell to those people? And also, let's be real, of the developers that use AI that make it into Y Combinator, are they more likely to be on the 54% or the 46%? Realistically speaking, they're more likely to be locked in. This is how it is. A lot of the people in the recent batches have said how useful my startup and startup adjacent videos have been, but also how useful my general dev stuff and AI coverage videos have been for them. So a lot of these AI for Thing companies wouldn't be my expected demographic. I'm expecting the dev tools to be hyped on me and for these guys to maybe sometimes know who I am. Almost every single one of these companies was really hyped about me. I was shocked. Like, of the people who came up to me, the vast majority were working on shit I didn't know anything about, like healthcare, like mapping software, like missiles, like car washes. I don't know shit about any of that, but they were coming up to me because they were hyped that I was there. And that is so cool and heartwarming and awesome. But it was counteracted by a very weird change. Most of the dev tool companies had no fucking idea who I was. I do not know what happened here. I am talking about businesses that are literally building tools for Cursor where none of the founders have ever heard my name. That's not even the funniest one. The funniest one by far was a kind of vibe coding enterprisey one that's building developer tools to help businesses integrate custom software faster. And I was skeptical. I didn't hear many of the things I would expect to hear. It was a recent pivot. The revenue wasn't great. And they were specifically targeting things like Supabase and other like data platforms that were harder to vibe code against. And I was like, okay, this is a bit red flaggy for me. You don't know who I am. You're talking about Supabase a lot. I don't see the space here. Like, how are you managing data if you're doing this? I had already written this one off. I'm not investing in this one. I'm just curious how this founder is thinking about this. I shit you not, they reply, oh, we built it all on Convex. They're the only backend platform we have found that does really well with vibe coding. Have you seen their thing, Chef? You know Chef, the vibe coder on the Codex website? That was my idea. They didn't know who I was, and they literally built their startup around a thing that only exists because of me. I have no idea what the fuck happened here. I still invested because I thought that was pretty cool. That all said, the majority of the dev tool companies I talked to had literally no idea whatsoever who I was. Maybe 3 of them did, and at least 5 of them didn't. That was very interesting. To me, what this suggests is that the dev tool companies are not as locked in as they were before, that they are trying to find edges in the industry, and they had a good enough pitch to sneak through that. And my hotter take here, and this one might get me in a little bit of trouble, but I can't just glaze the whole time, right? Y Combinator puts out a request for startups right before every batch. The partners, who are all founders, by the way, YC doesn't have investors that work there. Everybody there has built a company. So these founders, now partners, will describe things that they want to see more of in the batch in hopes that people will apply with ideas that are similar to this. Most of these people are what I would call ex-developers. I am a part-time developer who will eventually be an ex-developer. I just cannot justify writing code for the majority of my time nowadays, especially with one hand. I miss it dearly. I'll get back to it soon. But most of the Y Combinator partners have been writing code for some amount of their career. And they all notice this trend where we need the companies that really understand a field well. So let's go to Nautilus again for a sec. If you don't know jack shit about car washes, and you have 2 potential investments. One is a company that knows AI really well, that doesn't know car washes that well, and they say a bunch of things you don't really know if they're true or not. And the other option, we're on the carwash.com podcast. We help run multiple webinars about car washes. I've been working at them since I was 16, and here's all the things I've done. One of those is obviously the good investment, and it's very easy to know that without having any experience in the space. My spicy take, and this hurts, and I'm sorry to the partners that feel like this is a call-out. It is not meant to be. It is more an observation than a call-out. I am sorry. There's a Dunning-Kruger thing here. If you know nothing about car washes, you pick the person who knows about car washes. If you know a little about car washes, you pick the person who you think, based on their knowledge of whatever you're interested in, you think has the most capability of success. Once you know enough more, at the end of the Dunning-Kruger, you realize the person who knows more is much more likely to succeed than me. You pick them again. So if we draw this out, it's a Dunning-Kruger curve where as you start learning the thing, you get really confident. As you get further, you realize you're clueless, and then you slowly build up real knowledge. If your current understanding of car washes is here, you pick the person who knows what they're doing. If your current understanding of car washes is here, you pick the person who knows what they're doing. Your understanding is here, doesn't matter, you're going to pick the right person anyways. But what if your understanding is here? If you know a decent bit about car washes, but you think you know everything about them, this is when you start making edgy bets. If the person that the car wash company talked to knew a bit about car washes, they might have made dumb decisions. Replace the word car wash with software. Now imagine you don't know jack shit about coding, and you talk to somebody who's really deep in the software development space. They have years of expertise. They've been working in open source forever. They are involved in the open source communities that I and people like me care about. They watch all my videos. They're deep in the space. And now they're talking to a YC partner who doesn't know jack shit about software development. If this person seems deep and excited about the thing you don't know jack shit about, good chance they know what they're doing. If you've been writing software for a while, but haven't in a long time, and you know what it took to keep up, you know how important it was to be locked in, to keep up with what's going on in the industry, you know how the trends shift and change and all of that, you pick the person who deeply knows the thing. But let's say you recently got into vibe coding after not coding for 10 years, and you're like, oh my God, I had no idea coding was so easy. Being a good coder doesn't matter that much anymore. Anyone can just vibe code their way through Cursor and Windsurf. By the way, Windsurf and Cursor, basically the same thing. Windsurf's a little cheaper. You should probably use that. Those types of people will pick the startup that they think has the most likelihood of being worth billions, not the one that understands the space the best. My honest belief is that the recent surge of YC developer tools that don't know jack shit about the developer space is because there are partners at YC that are currently here in the Dunning-Kruger curve of how software development works, and they are saying stupid things, attracting stupid founders that bark back the same stupid beliefs they have, that result in mediocre at best and destructive at worst developer tool companies ending up in the batch. And I am not saying this is all of them. I would say this is at worst half of them. But there are more of these clueless developer tools companies than there are clueless non-developer tools companies all together combined. So it's funny that we went from the AI dev tool companies understanding dev really well, because you had to understand dev to do anything, to the AI dev tool companies being the only AI for X companies in the batch that don't actually understand the developer space that well. Of the 18 investments or so I did in this batch, I'm pretty sure I hit 2 developer tool companies total. Depends on if you count BitRig or not. Their audience isn't devs, but you get the idea. 2 to 3 of my 18 investments were dev tools. In previous batches, it's over half. It's also a smaller number. It's usually like 8 to 10. But this is a really good batch of people who are really locked in on the thing that they are doing. That is a huge industry shift, and I genuinely really hope it maintains, because the summer 25 batch is the best YC batch I've ever seen, as long as you don't look at the dev tools too hard. I think that's all I have to say about this one. What a chaotic experience it has been, talking to dev tools who have no idea what we're doing in this space, and talking to car wash companies that couldn't be more hyped to talk with me about the dev stuff that they're doing to make car washes better. I did not make a lot of money from this yet. In fact, it was a very expensive week for me. Thank you to my sponsors, and thank you to all of you for watching and making this possible. But hopefully, if all goes well in 5 to 10 years, the sponsors for this channel will be the companies I invested in instead of the companies funding my investments. Thank you again to everyone for watching this. I hope it's helpful for y'all to better understand how these startups work and how I think about them, and most importantly, how I make my investment decisions. I am not like many other investors, so don't assume that what I talk about here is going to get you an investment, because the majority of the investors I talk to don't know jack shit about anything. I am trying to explain this as this cool, weird, in-between position that I happen to be in, and I hope it's useful to somebody. I know this video would have been very useful to me not very long ago. Let me know what y'all think. Until next time, peace, nerds.